to get some insight into things that we can do. So without further ado, I'm going to give you the fantastic Soffiyah who happens to be connected on Twitter. I am honored, and she will take it away.
Okay, now no pressure, right? Welcome back after lunch, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here back in my old town. And I'm very pleased to share the stage panel with some very inspiring panelists. And I'm just going to give you their names, and then I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. To my immediate right is Carmen Perez. Next to Carmen is Gillian Giles. And to her far right, my far right also, is DiMauro?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists in 2 to 3 minutes, emphasis on 2 to 3 minutes, to just give a brief overview of who you are, the organization that you work with, and what you do. And Joe, I'll let you start.
Thank you. First, I feel like the worst panelist ever because I unfortunately have to leave 15 minutes early, so I'm sorry about that.
But you know, this is a discussion about incarceration, so we'll just lock him up. We won't let him leave. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
So my name is Joe DiMauro. I'm currently the grassroots coordinator for Coalition for Social Justice and the regional field director for Raise Up Massachusetts. And we recently won a couple years ago raising the minimum wage to $11 an hour by 2017 and getting sick time for all workers in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Gillian.
Hi, my name is Gillian Giles. I am currently a student at Hampshire College, but I'm also a writer for The Body is Not an Apology, and I have worked with organizations such as BYP 100, We Charge Genocide, and Shy Stops. Right now, I am a signer for Decolonize Media Collective, and last year we achieved a level of private prison divestment, and we got that written into Hampshire policy.
Thank you. And Carmen?
Mike?
Yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carmen Perez, and as you guys could read my bio, I'm actually going to tell you several things that are not on there. I am the youngest of 5. My father is 92 and my mother is 72, so I am their, what I used to say, their baby, but I'm actually a blessing to them. I have, my oldest brother was in and out of the system when I was growing up, and he's 14 years older than me, and I had a sister who was 19, and she was buried on my 17th birthday, so I grew up with the duality of the victim and offender in my life. That led me on a path of committing my life to actually working with young people in the system who grew up very similar to the conditions that I did, as well as my father was an original gangster, a pachuco, zoot suiter out of California, born in Anaheim, and so my passion has always been to work with young people, create positive alternatives, as well as I am the aunt, what we call tia, of 16 nieces and nephews. The 2 oldest are 25-year-olds, and the youngest, Kingston, who is the ringleader, is 3 years old. And so I just kind of want to share with you a little bit more of my background, because obviously you could read some of the work that we've accomplished. So thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm going to put the first question to you, Gillian, and let's put that close. Okay. So, Gillian, I'd like you to tell us a little bit, how did you come to identify the issues that your organization works on, and how did you decide how to approach that issue?
Okay, so specifically with divestment, DMC decided to focus on it because Hampshire was currently running a anti-racist campaign. And as activists and students, we sat with ourselves and we thought, how is investing in private prisons anti-racist? So we started to hold them accountable. We did research. We reached out to a lot of different schools, specifically drawing inspiration from CUNY and Columbia's divestment work. We started to create SMART goals. in terms of achievability and timeliness, and we strategized around those goals. We also thought about our institution. Hampshire is a neoliberal institution that really thrives off of a presentation of radicalness or like liberalness, and we played on that. So we basically made a list of institutions and companies involved in private prisons, looked at their investments, we presented that to them, and we held them accountable. We set demands, and if they didn't meet demands, we escalated it. And that's essentially how we got what we want.
Okay. So, Joe, I'm going to put the same question to you. How did you identify the issue you wanted to work on and decide on the approach that you thought would be most effective?
I think it's important to start with the fact that Raise Up Massachusetts is a coalition divided by unions, community groups, and faith-based organizations, which is very unique. So it's been a collaborative effort from all over the state, but I think that we, as a collective, decided that workers, we know that workers deserve the right to take care of themselves and a sick family member, and they shouldn't have to choose between a paycheck and a sick family member or themselves. So I think that noticing that was an issue, it still is an issue today, too. We're still trying to implement that, was definitely a huge step towards making that happen. So it's a collaborative effort.
Okay. And now I want to add a question to you, Joe. Since Gillian was saying that they looked at what was happening at other schools as an example, did Raise Up Massachusetts look at other movements in other states?
Mm-hmm. I think there was New Jersey that was implementing a lot of sick time policies. I think California as well. So I think it's become more, we look at the national, like presidential nominees, and they've been talking about sick time and paid family medical leave now. So it's becoming a more surfaced issue in the democratic process. So I think it just kind of surfaced itself that way, I believe. So.
Okay, so Carmen, similar question to you. How did your organization identify the issue it was going to work on and select what you thought would be the most effective approach?
So the organization that I'm the executive director of is called the Gathering for Justice, which was founded in 2005 after Harry Belafonte had seen a 5-year-old girl by the name of Jaisha Scott being handcuffed, and her charge was that she was unruly in the classroom. So what he did is he convened his colleagues and they created a covenant. He and Marian Wright Edelman created a covenant to stop child incarceration and began to mobilize and organize around the country. So fast forward from 2005 to 2013, after Mr. Belafonte had lent his celebrity support to Mayor de Blasio, and several of us had actually gone out to canvass for him. We were looking at, especially because he ran on this ticket of his son being a black man and the stop and frisk issue that was impacting our communities in New York. So I co-founded a group called Justice League NYC, which is made up of formerly incarcerated individuals, direct service providers, artists, activists, family members impacted by incarceration, to build collective power. And our first task was producing a 3-day conference called Growing Up Lockdown, which is a solutions conference really looking at dissecting the juvenile justice system. And from there, what ended up happening is immediately after our conference was over, the non-indictment of Officer Daniel Pantaleo, who was responsible for killing Eric Garner, had just was announced that he was not getting indicted. And so out of our conference, we were able to produce a set of 10 demands from the front end of the system, which is police accountability, to the back end of the system, which is incarceration, that allowed us to organize and mobilize around New York City, protest, host rallies, as well as create collaborations with other organizations that were on the front lines to shut the city to shut it down. So really it was because of a lot of the work that we did at our conference and working in community that allowed us to really develop the demands that we began to organize around.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things that our audience is really interested in is the issue of building coalitions. how did you go about identifying your coalition partners? What challenges did you confront? And what suggestions would you make to our organizers who are with us today as to how to deal with those challenges? And I'll start with Gillian on this one.
Can I go second, actually? Can I go second, actually?
You can.
Yeah.
All right, I'll switch to you, Joe.
Okay. So I think going back into the diagnosing of Raise Up, it's unions, community groups, and faith-based organizations. And I think that our progressive values have kind of, looking for the word, like we just kind of gravitated towards each other. I think our belief is that workers have the right to take their sick time, but workers have the right to put the health of their loved ones and themselves over a paycheck, and also the minimum wage. So there was a minimum wage campaign going on, and then the sick time campaign going on, and I thought that, well, there's leadership that thought by combining those campaigns together, it was a lot more effective than working separately, because those are affecting the same workers. And I think, I just think that those campaigns together would have been not as successful separately, because there would be a divide in those groups. So I think collaborating those efforts together was our strong suit.
Did you ever run into any problems with trying to hold the glue together?
I mean, I assume that there was probably problems in the steering committee or leadership level, but I know on I was the regional field director, so I was more on the regional level. But I can say that there's always an issue with some participation, but that's totally, I mean, that's expected with coalitions. But I think that at the end of it, the root of it all, I think we all have the same values and the same drive to get things done and work on issues that are really going to benefit people. So I think that Raise Up showed a lot of great unity in the state, and I think it's going to be progressing even more too. So we have a couple more issues we're working on recently: paid family medical leave, the fight for 15, so big box companies and workers with fast food workers earning a livable wage, and the Fair Share Amendment too. So.
Okay. Jillian, you asked to go second?
Yes, I can go second. Okay, so let me move this microphone. Hello, y'all. So about coalitions, college is a weird place because it's a place of impermanence. So we have folks who come to college and they go for 4 years, and then we have more folks coming in. So they're, in a sense, I don't want to use the word intergenerational because it doesn't seem right, but there's an evolution of DMC. There are people who started divestment before I even came to college, and I really felt like it was necessary to raise up those names. And I'm going to do that now. Some of the workers who really started the divestment campaign but are no longer in DMC, no longer at Hampshire College, are Nzinga, Free Woman, Quasi, Tony Stone, Langston Sanchez, Daiki Girl, Sakona Fitz, Med Diallo, Namrata Jacob, Sydney Loving, Kamika Bennett, Anave Zavita, and Yesenia Esmeralda. And then we had a bunch of people who joined the coalition from UMass, a neighboring school that we have. And coalition building was really about, I think, a bunch of people with the same ideology and politics coming together for a common interest and goal. And with DMC, because it's run and led by students of the global majority, which is POC students, we basically committed ourselves to decolonizing, actively struggling and working to confront like domestic and national issues of social justice. And when we started seeing other schools commit themselves to divestment, we felt like it was central that we committed ourselves towards the goal of Black liberation because of the violence and harm that private persons do. And I think in terms of working with a student group and building coalition, especially in such an impermanent place, it really involves holding space, continuing to hustle, and then also looking at the environment and how it shapes and adapts. So a lot of our work was response to like environmental stuff, because at the time when divestment started, there was an anti-racist campaign that Hampshire specifically was working on, and then calling that out. And then it kind of evolves from that, I guess, and that's how the coalition stays together. We have the similar politic. We look at the institution and the injustices and what needs to be done, and we do it.
And what kind of challenges or unraveling of coalitions arose?
I think in terms of, because DMC is so, it evolves so quickly, and we bring in new folks and they don't understand the work that's happening or the history or the context in the past. So a lot of our challenges have been holding space for people who don't necessarily have organizing like backgrounds, who don't necessarily know what tasks or what history has happened. But we are continuing to work on, and have actively worked on holding space for people, making sure people are involved, and then reaching out and asking for help from other organizations like UMass and such.
I don't mean to press you, but yes, I do, because I think our folks will want to know, when you say holding space for people who don't have an organizing background, could you give some concrete examples of what are the kinds of things that you did to try to bring those folks up to speed so they could be functioning optimally for the coalition?
Well, Well, for the first meeting, when we introduced new students, we would usually introduce DMC's politic and mission statement, and then we usually show them what the work that we've done is. And then also, it involves assigning like different tasks and including new folks into like demand making and certain campaigns that we've already been working on, are continuing to work on. We ask people to show up. And if they are, especially because a lot of the people who join DMC have the similar politic, have the similar alignment, and like the passion to do it, they show up, and that's how they kind of come to speed. But also, as it evolves, we kind of, new students, and then also me, because I'm a second year, we kind of evolve, but we make it something else. So we make it new based on history, but then also we build on it, and we allow new students to help us build.
Okay. Carmen, I would imagine in the work that you've done, you had many ways to build coalition. How did you hold the coalition together, particularly when challenges would come up? And if you would explain to the audience maybe some of the challenges that did arise.
So for us, I think it's really important to state that a lot of our coalition building was really based on our relationships with individuals and organizations, and cultivating those relationships. So, and also creating entry points for not only organizations to get involved, but also individuals that wanted to be part of the movement. And I think that's something that Justice League does that's very unique that the Gathering doesn't. The Gathering is really more organizational based, where Justice League is more individual based. And one of the things that we do at our coalition meetings, we have about 79 to 85 coalition coalition partners, and outside the door we have posters that say high impact, low ego. And we do that because oftentimes I think a lot of people, and a lot of us, right, come with our own agenda, come with our own set skills, come with our own values, and it is really about organizing under a common ideology. And what we say is building the beloved community and also keeping your eyes on the prize. We are grounded in Kingian nonviolence, which is the ideology and philosophy of Dr. King. And we've been training around that across the country for the past 11 years. But it's really important for us to kind of hold on to some of the 6 principles, like attacking the forces of evil and not the people, especially when we're working or we're out on the streets marching around police accountability or police brutality. And so we really try to train individuals in not only the ideology, but also ensuring that those that are part of our coalition also have a say in what we build. And so one of the major events that we collectively worked on was our Dream for Justice March, which was a march during MLK, as well as our our March to Justice, which was a 250-mile march from New York City to D.C. to deliver 3 criminal justice reform bills. And so a lot of, I think, the challenges that we face is that when we have meetings, we play the inside-outside game. So it's not just about, preaching to the choir. It's also advocating for policy. It's also having to have meetings with either the mayor or the governor. And I think what happens is that there are organizations and individuals that may not agree with some of our tactics and don't necessarily see their lane or see a lane for all of us to actually move forward. And so that could be a little challenging, especially through social media when people blast each other. And there's also no accountability with certain individuals. I always say I'm accountable to a council of elders, not only Harry Belafonte, but Nane Alejandres, who's the founder of Barrios Unidos. There are people who I and also you, I constantly come to you and I'm like, I need help. And I think that to me keeps me really grounded and allows me to kind of seek wisdom where I may not be able to kind of see what's in front of me. But I think right now what we're facing in regards to some of our expanding our work is the lack of resources. It's very challenging in the sense of Justice League is a volunteer group and everybody has a full-time job, and so you try to get in where you fit in. And I think that's kind of what's a little hard in trying to keep the coalition together, is that we all are trying to move policy. But the beautiful thing about our coalition is the fact that we do collaborate on policy. We do show up to press conferences. We are debriefed on some of the policies that these organizations are moving forward, so we try to move together. So there are challenges, but there are a lot of great things that comes out of partnering with other groups and coalition building.
Okay, well, I'm glad that I think from each of your perspectives, the audience knows that it's not just all smooth sailing, ice cream with sprinkles on top. So let's talk a little bit about unexpected allies, because we know as activists and organizers, there's a real comfort zone with preaching to the choir, right? But we need more than just those folks who are in the choir to move a movement to bring about change. So I'm going to start with you, Joe. If you would share with the audience, who were some of the unexpected allies that you have found to be very effective partners in your work?
Yes, actually I want to give a little shout out to an expected ally, Maria Elena from Neighbor to Neighbors in the audience right there. I love her to death. She's a part of Raise Up Massachusetts as well. But I think going back to unexpected allies, I think reaching out, we have to look at our base and our sense of low-income areas and communities of color is our base, and we have to find new ways to reach out to everyone, and also finding ways to reach out to millennials as well, too, like using social media as a form of outreach, too. But I think going into the unexpected allies, I would think our local legislators, holding them accountable to the issues that matter and the issues that we're working on too. I think it's easy for them to run on an issue, but actually push something and support something and get out and talking about it is another thing too. So I would say local and even state legislators as well, talking about the issues and also focusing on as a platform. It's something that they can push if they were to get elected or are elected.
And what was the method, or what did you find to be the most effective way to get those local legislators to come on board and support you?
Yep, so we hosted a lot of statewide phone banks using Hub Dialer, where we would reach out to these legislators, and then Hub Dialer provides this system where we can actually forward any voter that is interested to their local legislators' voicemails. So we just blast every single legislator's voicemail with messages of voters that support this issue and is asking them to call on them to support it and also vote a certain way on it. So it puts pressure on them that way that they're being watched by their communities and being held accountable. So.
Okay, Carmen, what about unexpected allies in your work? Who were they, and what methods did you use to approach them to bring them on board?
So we have several what we call non-traditional allies and partners. One is the 12 whistleblowers, police officers that came out against the racist quota system that Commissioner Bratton didn't exist. So we have a campaign called the NYPD 12. So obviously for us, it's a little challenging considering that we are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. We do work on criminal justice, juvenile justice reform, and we have these 12 officers that have come to Justice League to work with us in order to hold the NYPD accountable, which is a little risky in the sense of the fact that, again, our strategies and our tactics may not be aligned with others, right? But for us, it's been a benefit in the sense of now we know how to kind of like address police accountability, understanding some of the policies that are in place that they say don't exist. We're able to kind of have some real substantial evidence in order to fight against those racist initiatives or policies. Another non-traditional, unexpected ally for us are artists and celebrities that are really attracted to the work that we do and give us a platform to actually share our work. And so it touches masses and it touches other individuals that maybe we don't have access to. So we've had people like Rhapsody, Common, Russell Simmons, Ebro from Hot 97, Nessa, all these different individuals that give us a platform to share the work that we're doing, not only on a local level as well as a statewide and a federal level. We also work in collaboration with our local 1199 SEIU as well as SEIU International, and those partnerships are really powerful in the sense of that they allow us to bring out numbers, but they also support some of our initiatives that we do, as well as elected officials. We work closely with a lot of elected officials to work on criminal and juvenile justice reform. And so we always talk about, or I've heard previously, there's no permanent friends or no permanent enemies, but there is obviously an interest that we have. And so we are able to kind of share with some elected officials, kind of like keep our finger on the pulse and let them know how they could reform the system, but also holding them accountable where we're advocating for policies.
Okay. Gillian, have you come across unexpected allies in your work? And if so, how did you manage to bring them on board?
All right, allies and unexpected allies. A lot of it was like, okay, so Hampshire is a private neoliberal institution, and there's a certain elitism that comes with that. So a lot of the original allies were just intra-Hampshire, but then we started to reach out to the 5 colleges in the area. So we'd reach out to folks at UMass, which is State College, and then Smith College, Mount Holyoke, Amherst. And then unexpected allies, just because of the class divide and the elitism, were also community colleges, which did a lot for us, like Western Field State and American International, Holyoke Community College, and a bunch of other places. We also looked at people in the community for resources, advice, and allyship. The great thing about being in a college and having access to resources and that kind of privilege is you have a certain allowance and ability to funnel money out of the institution and into communities and allies and people who really deserve the compensation. So we would hire speakers and activists and just great thinkers. And that's kind of also DMC's politic, funneling money out of the institution into communities. So we would do that. We'd bring in people, and they'd help us with divestment. And then also, like, allies were also sometimes tricky. We had a lot of media allies, so we had, like, radio shows, and we had a lot of, like, student papers and papers coming to us. And some of those people were our allies, but then some people ended up not being allies. So we'd have an article written about us that was a little slanderous at times, which is unfortunate, but it happens. So, allies. You got to be careful about who you trust, but also open yourself up. Don't let certain, like, elitist divisions prevent you from reaching out to community members and then also other schools. And then also make sure that you like are acknowledging your privilege, attending like a private college when you do that. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Certainly.
So one of the things I just wanted to add is that we have a lot of friends in the radio business, and it's really cool when you like turn on the radio and you're listening to music and all of a sudden they're talking about like raise the age campaign and like removing 16-year-olds. And so also those kind of like non-traditional, like just calling up the radio station, inviting when you talk about what does it take to really like build those relationships, it's just like calling somebody up and saying, hey, could we go to tea or could we go to coffee and build those relationships. And ultimately it's like changing the hearts and minds of individuals. And Mr. Belafonte always says, you got to like change the hearts and minds and champion people to your cause. And so that's really been effective when it comes to like having these non-traditional allies and allowing even like the unions and other major or like immigration, all these different issues or these different movements to actually find their intersectionality, and that's how you really build some really meaningful coalitions as well as allies. So I just kind of wanted to add.
No, that's great. Okay, so we have a magic wand, and for each of your respective movements, we've already declared victory. All right.
Abolition.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's an up moment, right? Okay, so we've declared victory. So for each of you, what would be the next issue you would take on and why? Carmen?
Ooh.
Because you never tire of activism, right?
I am not tired. I've been in it for 20 years and I'm going strong.
Okay.
So if we had a world without prisons, if we're there, definitely, I think my next issue to tackle would be cancer. And I only say that because I feel a lot of our communities. I had a nephew who was 22 years old, graduated from UC San Diego, and when he came home, he was diagnosed with sarcoma cancer. And so I don't know if many of you know, but I used to have my hair half shaved. And it was really interesting. I had landed in Ferguson when I got the call from California that my nephew had cancer, and I was supposed to be there to support a lot of the organizers in Ferguson. But about 5 months prior to that, I was in my office and I was trolling around in my chair, and I had told my director of operations that I wanted to work with children who were impacted by cancer, and which is really interesting because then my nephew got it, and so I kind of feel that those are the two issues. Incarceration obviously has impacted me as a child, but as an adult, it broke our cancer kind of broke our family a little bit, and so that'll probably be the issue that I will work simultaneously as we work at, or no, because we're in a world without prisons, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Gillian, what would be your next issue to work on?
Yeah, I love that idea of a world without prisons. That's always my immediate goal. But in terms of like directly after divestment and relating to divestment, Hampshire still has a significant amount of money in hedge funds, which are basically funds that are under like a topic or title, and you're not necessarily aware of where that money is going. So my next issue would probably be working on Hampshire's hedge funds and making sure that those are not going to prisons.
I have a feeling Hampshire is going to accelerate your graduation.
Oh, they would love that.
Okay, Joe. Victory's declared in your issue. What's the next thing you're taking on?
I think I'm wearing two hats right now. So for Coalition for Social Justice / Raise Up Massachusetts, paid family medical leave is an issue. Fair share amendment, which would be taxing people making over $1 million a year, a little more in taxes, paying their fair share in taxes, which would put over $1 billion back into our economy to fund things like education and transportation and infrastructure, which is super important, and the Fight for 15, so that way fast food workers have a livable wage. But my second hat it's going to get a little personal at this point, but I am very passionate about mental health. that's something that I've always been passionate about. As me, I have battled depression and anorexia for the past 4 years of my life. So I think that's something that I'm very passionate about. I actually launched a nonprofit organization called Project Fearless recently that will help people living with mental health issues pay for their co-pays if they can't afford it, which is something I'm very passionate about thank you. Because if we look at the two reasons why people don't get help, it's because one, they don't feel accepted / welcomed, and two, because they can't afford it. And that's something that I think everyone has the right to get the help that they need and that they want. And there should be no obstacle in that. So that's my...
Okay. All right, now I'm going to ask a question that you were not anticipating. It's always my favorite thing to do as a moderator. This is a very sobering question. Recently in Ferguson, a young person who was an activist there was found dead in a car after being shot and burned. And that is the second activist in Ferguson who was killed in a similar fashion. All of you are fairly seasoned activists. I want you to put yourself in the place of being an organizer and activist in Ferguson, which is not a big leap for you, Carmen. What would you suggest with your experience as to how organizers in Ferguson should protect themselves and continue to do the work? And I'll start with you, Joe.
I think that it's very sad to have to think about that, I think, because I think that kind of goes into almost like victim blaming in a way, where like we have to protect ourselves for doing the good work. When I just think that that's just ridiculous. It breaks my heart because as a gay man, I know when we think about the LGBT rights movement, we think about white, young gay men. Oh, sorry, just threw a pen cap at you. White, gay, young men, and we don't think about the trans women of color who actually started the movement and threw the first heels and the first bricks at Stonewall. And we look at Marsha P. Johnson, who is an activist in the LGBT rights movement and was killed, who was found in the Hudson River. So that breaks my heart because I feel like it's very personal for me in the sense that my LGBT brothers and sisters have been killed in the past. And I think I have a privilege as, I'm more Latino than anything else, but you would never expect that looking at me, and I have a privilege looking white. But I think that just breaks my heart, and I don't ever want to like pass on information like saying that this is how you protect yourself. I just wish that we can live in a world where that comes more to light and that becomes more of a priority to fight. And we change policy and we change hearts and minds, like you said, so that way that doesn't happen and we don't have to go around walking around and telling our activists or our organizers that this is how you don't get killed. I think that we just have to change policies so that we are more protected in that sense. I don't know. I think I'm running on this, but that's just I don't think I have advice or something that would stop. I don't know. It's just that. Yeah. Thank you, Marlena. She got me.
Carmen, I'm going to put the question to you second.
So, first of all, my condolences to the community of Ferguson for losing such a courageous young person who was willing to tell the truth and to talk about the co-option of movements. I know for myself, for the past 3 years, I've been a target of death threats based on the work that we're doing around police accountability and police brutality. The marches, I remember after the 2 officers that were killed by a person who came from Baltimore in Brooklyn, we were asked to put a moratorium on all our events, specifically our marches, and so what we ended up planning was a silent vigil. But because of all the death threats that I was getting, I no longer took any media interviews because I feared for my life. I don't necessarily look like everybody else. I have very strong features. My hair is very unique, and so I could be picked out in a crowd. And so, thank God we have people like the Nation of Islam and the Zulu Nation that provides protection for some of us women in the front lines, which are another non-traditional allies. But we have to be a stronger community for one another. Not only are we targets of, death threats or violent attacks, we are also targets by other activists that will put us on blast and will bring harm our way. Recently there was a meme created about myself and 3 other women or 2 other women, and it's just really sad. It's not sad, it actually really pisses me off that other men would do that to women and put us in a dangerous predicament. But my work has never been safe. I work in prisons. I've been going into prisons since my early 20s. I've gone to the prisons of El Salvador to support a peace process between MS 13 and 18th Street gang leaders. The work that I do when it comes to working on violence prevention, gang intervention, police accountability, and criminal justice reform is, maybe it's now sexy, but it hasn't always been sexy. And
What would you tell the folks in Ferguson to do based on your experience?
I personally really don't know what to say, but that my heart goes out to them, and to create a safety network. When you feel you're in danger, who could you call? I have so many questions about that young man's death. And I just don't know how that could have happened. And I know that, when you're walking, make sure you look around. You just don't know what to say to somebody, other than what you tell yourself. Don't ever walk alone. Report the trolls on social media. Create a safety network of people that you could count on and you could rely on and you could trust. And also create an environment of love, of friends when you're feeling down, because this work is not easy, and you sometimes feel like you're in it alone. And to also know that, we in New York or in California are always in solidarity with our people in Ferguson, and we love them. So.
Okay. Gillian, based on your experience, what suggestions would you make?
Oh dear. So in answering this question, I don't draw from my work from DMC. I draw more from my work in Chicago, where I'm from BYP 100, and from We Charge Genocide, and from activists and people I've come to be in community with, and people I know. In terms of safety, as someone who's Black and queer and disabled, and just living in that body and knowing what my placement in the United States is, and looking at history of COINTELPRO and hate crimes, I don't think there is any safety guarantee. I don't think there's anything I could ever say that would guarantee safety, any tips, because by living and breathing in this body, in this Blackness, I am unsafe at every moment, at every time of day, and coming to that reality is really horrific, especially as you get more into organizing work, especially as you go to protests and you watch how police and just people in general interact with Black bodies, and the violence and the trauma that kind of creates. I can think of harm reduction measures and safety things that BYP 100 have used for protests in general. There's a red, yellow, green system. So when we were doing an action where we anticipated arrest, red were people who were automatically going to get arrested, and then they were aware of that reality. We had yellow people who may possibly get arrested, and then we had green people whose roles were less likely to get arrested. I say this saying that just by being Black in America, anytime you get arrested for almost no reason, but there are certain roles in activism where there's more likely to be arrest. I think also in terms of dealing with that horror and reality of being Black in America, of constantly worrying about safety, of the possibility of death, it's just important to have communities and to have love to hold you through it. If you're not, and also self-care. Self-care is really important because those realities are so hard to deal with. I feel like a lot of organizers burn themselves out because they don't want to see the world continue to create harm, so they're always organizing and they're planning, and then they end up harming themselves. They keep trying to give from nothing when they're not taking care of themselves. So I think a lot of it is like self-care, any like harm reduction safety measure you can think of, like the red-green system, and then also like living in spaces with organizers where you can actively like recognize that like being Black is unsafe. And for Ferguson in particular, I think in terms of holding them, I think it's just being reminded, one, grieving over like that loss of like a beautiful Black body, another person who's been hurt, who's been harmed, who's been killed by like the U.S. And the society that we live in, and then also like remembering like why we do this work and why it's important, because we can't continue to live in like this state of like constant like unsafety and harm and hate, and then this uplifting it, but also making sure that we as a community are taking care of ourselves, and we're loving ourselves, and we're loving our community members, and we're watching out for each other.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Before we open up for questions and answers, because I know Joe has to leave early, I want to give each of you an opportunity to tell the audience what your movement's success is going to look like 5 years from now. Joe.
Because I'm going first. So I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to allow me to speak on the issues that are really important to me today. So thank you. But I think that 5 years from now, I hope we live in a world where I think workers have the right to put themselves and the health of their loved ones first. I think if we look at paid family medical leave, the fact that we don't have paternity leave yet, or maternity leave in Massachusetts is under the federal law where it's still unpaid. And I know one of our directors for the State Voices table is recently going on maternity leave, and she has to use her sick time and vacation time, which absolutely disgusted me, because we're pushing all these progressive issues, but yet it still is to the point where we're not there yet, where someone is doing a lot of great work, still can't take that time off. So I think that in 5 years from now, I hope that like health isn't. I think health should come before a paycheck in every aspect of work, but also from a personal level too. I think hearing your stories about the work that you guys have done too has been really incredible, and I hope to see that a world without jails would be great too, like you said, but also that Black Lives Matter isn't intimidated by certain groups of people. I think that we need to talk about that as much as we can, and we need to talk about social justice issues as much as we can, even if it's not popular at the moment. We need to talk about them. We need to break down barriers, and we need to just like, invite ideas and new works to the table too. So I hope for that as well. But yeah, that's kind of my thing.
Okay, Gillian, 5 years from now, Hampshire will have released you.
Yeah.
What will your work look like?
Well, in 5 years from now, I will no longer be at Hampshire, and I hope the DMC in Hampshire reflects what the students and the activists deserve in that space, living in that space. And I hope that Hampshire will have completely divested from private prisons, and the hedge funds were checked out. I also 5 years from now, I hope that like the activists and people in DMC are just like continuing to build from the work that we did, and then also, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. What is your work going to look like 5 years from now?
So my vision for 5 years from now is to have a coordinated criminal justice movement, as well as a comprehensive national criminal juvenile justice agenda, and have in every jurisdiction a system that is accountable and has instruments and tools that allow for accountability, as well as in 5 years, I hope that we have removed all children from adult facilities and we integrate them into community-based organizations or integrate them into culturally and age-appropriate services or spaces. Yay! So that's what I envision for 5 years, and that's what I'm going to work towards. But can I say what I envision for the next 2 months?
Like we could say no. Of course
Okay.
you want to know about 2 months from now.
On October 13th, 14th, and 15th, Growing Up Lockdown is coming to Ventura County in California. So if you guys are interested, it's a 3-day juvenile justice conference that's infused with music and culture. It is so amazing. It's intergenerational, intercultural, and it's solution-based. We're also going to be building Justice League California. So if you guys are in Cali, let me know. You guys could go to our website, www.gatheringforjustice.org, and our conference is free, so share it with any of your friends. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Gillian. Okay, we got more for the future.
In 5 years from now, I also hope that the work of DMC is actively recognized and appreciated. I think, especially in terms of the response from Hampshire College, our work and our labor has been so intensive, but it's never recognized. And the college profits so much off of that. I think in terms of activists in general, there are so many institutions that profit off of activists' work and voices and labor, but it goes unpaid. Even me sitting here at Harvard Law, one of the richest institutions in America in terms of colleges, I sit here at this panel unpaid. This is a labor of love. So I just really wish that in 5 years, more activists and DMC and this abroad, their labor and their love is recognized, appreciated, compensated.
Amen to that.
Okay. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Please line up at the microphone. We'll take a few questions. Where's our timekeeper? How much time do we have? We're good? Okay. So most of you have never heard me moderate, so I have to share something that's very important. And in a place like Harvard, I think it's extremely important that I make this point. Questions end with a question mark.
No statements.
Have I got that?
Yeah. So I had a question for the three panelists. You could briefly describe running an organization as well as being involved in coalition work for an end goal is very challenging. Could you just briefly talk about your decision-making process, consensus to use one organization, one vote, to use hierarchy, sociocracy, dynamic governance? How do you make decisions within the political work you're doing with coalitions that come from a broad spectrum? That's been the most effective, in your opinion? Is that okay? Did I just...
Yeah, that was a question. I love it. Great example. Okay, who wants to take that on?
I
don't all shout.
I guess I'll do.
Go ahead, Joe.
So unfortunately, I'm not at the huge decision-making level, but I do have the luxury of deciding a huge part of Massachusetts and what goes on and the strategy for that. So I cover Bristol County, half of Plymouth County, and the whole Cape and Islands for the regional level. And I think it's very interesting to have many different groups around the table. Because a lot of them have different priorities as opposed to the ones they're working on too, which is a huge responsibility. But I think it's important to understand and also remind yourself why we're doing the work that we're doing and what's bringing us all to the table. So I know it sounds a lot easier than it actually is, but it's definitely a challenge and something that you are constantly building and working on. Yeah, so I think that's from the regional perspective. So.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? How decisions are made in your coalitions?
So I could So for us in Justice League, or even in kind of like our coalition meetings, we really look at capacity and resources and follow through. Are we really able to follow through with what we're trying to present, as well as do we have the capacity and do we have the resources? So for instance, if we're looking at, pushing the Right to Know Act, it's a collective decision. And then the bottom line, just legally, would be somebody like myself who actually runs the organization. But really, it's always, do we have the capacity to do this rally? Do we have, this is a great idea. It seems like there's always really great ideas, but we just want to make sure that the follow-through is intentional, the relationships are intentional, and that we are actually going to make a positive impact versus, and also if another organization is doing something similar, how do we actually collaborate with them to not reinvent the wheel?
Okay. Gillian, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I'm going to add to the statement on intention. I think a lot of decision-making starts with intention-making. For example, outside divestment, we had to do student demands last year following divestment for other reasons. And we came to this point where, with divestment, a lot of our goals were SMART goals. We took into consideration timeliness and what's the word? It starts with an A. I'm going to use a different word. Acceptableness, maybe, or achievability. That was the word I wanted to use. Achievability. But then when we looked at student demands, we took up a different politic of what we deserved as students at Hampshire campus, as students at Hampshire College. And we also had SMART goals, but we also had goals where we just thought of things that all Black and brown bodies on that campus deserve. So we had reparations in there because we deserve reparations. We deserve to be paid. And we just thought about history and we draw from that. And then also a lot of it came down to one, spitballing ideas and then having group approval, but then also actively working through certain decisions, tailoring them. So someone will have an original idea and then someone else will come and tailor that idea. And there's an evolution of ideas, and that's how we get to a certain process that's group collaborative.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to each of you. Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, so my question is about communities that are most impacted by incarceration or justice, and then the allies and people who maybe are more insulated from it but care a lot, so the allies to this movement. How do you balance voice and opportunity without saying no, we don't want this side, we want both sides to work together, and we need to really leverage this voice? What's been your experience in that area?
Who wants to take that on first?
So for us, I mentioned a lot of our work, the people that are part of our coalitions or part of even Justice League are formerly incarcerated. So for us, it's also understanding that there's some doors that we can't open, so we need to leverage those relationships and get into the door through those individuals, and also ensure that those that are directly impacted are also being seen and heard and have a space to actually thrive. And so for us, it's always being intentional about complementing both. And also creating entry points. I always say it's very important, Justice League, where we are Black, Latino, Muslim, white, Asian, and we're extremely diverse. And a lot of folks who are white allies in the space also know not to take up too much space. And you don't even have to say it. They just know their space and their place. And when there's tension, right, when there's sometimes maybe some folks taking up, you could have an honest conversation with them about it. But I know for us, it's being intentional about those. It kind of depends on the environment that we're in. It's not necessarily, okay, it's all going to be, all the people of color in this place, because maybe that's not the appropriate place. And you also don't want to tokenize, or you don't want to use people as ornaments. And I remember when I used to work directly with young people in the detention center, they were always being asked to come and sit at these events, and they were never really debriefed, and they didn't really know what was going on, and people were using systems words and racial disparities and wearing the degrees on their sleeves. And so it's also kind of like, how do you actually allow an individual to thrive in that space? But for us, it's entry points, people knowing not to take up too much space, and also being inclusive but intentional, and not marginalizing or re-victimizing people.
Joe he's chomping at the bit. He's got something else to say. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I feel awful. I have to leave right now, but I just wanted to echo everything you said. I think it's super important to be inclusive, and you also have to understand that the people who these issues are affecting should be the face of the entire movement, and not have people who aren't affected speak for them. So I think that's a huge part of it. So I just want to say thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I feel awful that I have to really run to a train right now. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I hope you catch your train. Thank you. Gillian, did you have one parting comment on?
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with funneling money out of the institution, which is DMC's primary biggest politic. So funneling money out of the institution means raising up the voices and giving money to folks who need it, and most of the time we prioritize marginalized people in the community. That being said, in terms of allies and making them the face, for instance, we did a lot of work. Also, it was probably mostly Hampshire Students Against Mass Incarceration, which is DMC's sister group, but includes white students, who did a lot of work with the Free Ayub campaign. Ayub is an incarcerated man from a neighboring area called Springfield. So it's uplifting his voice when we have conferences and letting him speak through voice calls and collect calls, and making those sorts of people the faces of movements when we think about the importance of divestment from prisons and what that means and who that's impacting.
Okay. All right, I think we have hit time. How'd we do? Everybody ready to go out and change the world? Okay. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our hosts. I have to give a shout out to our photographer in the green shirt, who's a dear friend of mine for many years. Okay.
Thanks all three of our remaining panelists.
You could have easily been a panelist.